Well, they've introduced themselves, but let me name check again the members of our finalist team AMIRES. That's John Kennedy Mwangi, Rudolf Freitschek, Roman Paszek, and Lenka Barova. Now, we're going to hear their presentation as they attempt to persuade the judges that they should be the winner.
Thank you very much. My name is John Kennedy Mwangi. I'll be presenting for AMIRES. I'll be presenting for regions for the challenge in economy for the people. From 2014 to 2020, the cohesion policy has been a strategy to promote development and reduce disparities amongst EU regions. Next slide, please. The new policy is set to run from 2021 to 2017 to 2027, and we entered our proposal for the challenge to an economy that works for the people to create a visualization platform using data from different sources to map out the cohesiveness across NUTS2 regions in Europe. More so, the EU for Regions platform will allow citizens to easily and clearly perceive how their respective regions perform on development indicators. Next slide, please. So we allow the use of open data and encourage the open knowledge to allow citizens to visualize and interact with multi-source open data relating to development and identifies institutions receiving funding, and especially for CORDIS, and compare the flow of funds to their regions and identify the relationship between different development indicators and compare with their regions. Next slide, please. Who are the targeted users? These may include the citizens themselves, national and regional governments, institutions and researchers, policymakers, NGOs, and also funding consultants who are seeking to have better insights on regional cohesiveness. Next slide, please. So for us to be able to create this platform, we use data from CORDIS, SIF, and Eurostat, and we leverage on the open source development platforms of R and Shiny to allocate geocodes to NUTS2 regions across the datasets so that we can be able to merge them. Next slide, please. Now I'll be presenting the functionalities within EU for Regions platform, and next slide, please. And thank you. So from the first module, we can see that we have the ability to visualize data from CORDIS and SIF and also Eurostat in their raw form. And for CORDIS, we can be able to see the number of projects per region as well as funding, as well as visualize or identify the institutions that received funding from CORDIS. So for 2016, for example, if we take 2016 as an example, we can see that the area around Paris, that is Ile-de-France, received the highest funding. Also in Eurostat, it had the highest population. But if we compare to the percentage of researchers, we see that this area was nowhere to be found among the top 20 regions that received the funding from CORDIS. So for the second module, we compared multiple regions for a greater period of time, that is from 2007 to 2020, and we chose Prague, Berlin, Zurich, and France, Paris. And we can see that there's a great difference between the amount of received from CORDIS by the area around Paris compared to other regions. But if we compare if we compare the amount received from cohesion funds, we can see Prague received the highest amount, and this one is in line with the fact that cohesion funds are directed to regions that have 90% less of average of the EU in terms of gross national income. In the third module, we compare two indicators for different regions with the population as a third parameter. And in this case, we chose Prague again, Berlin and Zurich, and Paris for 2016. And we chose the amount received from cohesion funds and as well as patent applications. And we can see that Prague received, at the far right, received high amount of cohesion funds, but it also ranks low compared to the other cities in amount of patent applications. But if we change to GDP, we can see that there's a clear relationship whereby Paris has a high GDP as well as a high amount of patents applied. In the fourth module, we are able to visualize two indicators for one region, and in this case, we chose Stuttgart in Germany. And we can see that over time, if the amount of funds received from CORDIS leads to a higher increase in amount of people or personnel employed in the research and development sector. In the last module, we are able to cluster different regions depending on two parameters. In this case, we chose cohesion funds and as well as employment rates. And for 2016, if we increased to 4 clusters, we are able to see that Sicilia is at the far end or the far right, with receiving high amount of cohesion funds, but it's still having low employment rates. But what would happen if we change this to GDP as an independent variable? We see that GDP for Sicilia, it comes back to the middle, whereby it has less GDP as well as employment rates. And it shows that Sicilia, the GDP could be a driving factor for employment rates less than the cohesion funds. For the same module, if we are trying to find the regions that are in the same cluster, we can use the table below the graph, and we can see that for the area around Paris was the only one in cluster number 1. Next slide, please. Next slide. Thank you. So in conclusion, I can say that we are creating a platform that can shed more light in the state of cohesion amongst EU regions to encourage inclusivity for all NATSU regions for a more balanced and more sustainable regional development. For future development, we are working on improving the platform by increasing the forecasting module, as well as increasing data from other data sets that can shed more light on developments of different regions. And we also suggest to the gatekeepers of the data that they can include, for example, NATS2 or NATS3 codes in all their data sets, so that it's better to be able to link these data sets together, and the people who are using the data can be able to allow for granularity from country to regions. Next slide. And in the last slide, we see that the team members that were involved are Rudolf, Lenka, and Paszek, and myself, John. Thank you, and I welcome any questions.
Thank you very much, John, for that presentation. Now, often when people begin a project and teams begin a project, they have a clear idea of where they want to go along the way. But did you have any surprises or any new things that popped up as you went about achieving your goal?
The new surprises will be that it was not easy to find a clear linkage, and that's why, for example, for CORDIS data, we had to find the NATS region by ourselves using the postal codes. And from our suggestion, that's why we are mentioning that it will be better if for the next coming data sets, that they could include such kind of variables in their data.